Welcome back, guys. The Great Resignation is here. Now, this is a term that was coined by someone named Anthony Klotz earlier this year. He's a professor at Texas A&M University, and basically what he noticed is that unhappiness, stress, burnout at companies was at an all-time high, and that the end result was going to be this great resignation of employees. Sure enough, last April, it did happen. There were 4 million people that quit their jobs. So let's talk about why that is and why I think this is going to be continuing into the future, or at least into the near future. All right, item number 1. People had a taste of working from home. When the recent events had caused everything to shut down, what happened? If you had a job where you had to be there, those jobs were put on furlough. Either that or they were just laid off, never to open again. But if you had a job where you had the capability to work from home, most of those companies were making that a reality. So if you had, let's say, an occasional work from home, you had a VPN, you had a laptop that you could move around, they said to all of those people, just go home. We'll let you know when to come back. We're not sure where this is headed, but just go home. So what did that do to everyone? All of a sudden, they were at home every day of the week. So there are pros and cons with this, right? If you are an introvert and you don't like being around a lot of people, this was great. If you're an extrovert and you love being around a lot of people, this was miserable. And of course, that's what causes the polarization of this topic. Now, for those people that did enjoy it, let's talk about them for a minute. Why? Well, suddenly, instead of having to go into an office every day, they were free to spend more time at home with their kids, or with their loved ones, or just doing whatever it was that they wanted to do. Think about your commute every day. I have had commutes up to an hour long each way. That's 2 hours of my day that I just lost. I was sitting in the car, staring at traffic, looking at the person in front of me, wishing that they would move, or trying to weave my way in and out, trying to get where I wanted to go, and it was all a waste of time. Not having to do that, I suddenly realized, hey, wait a minute, I have 2 hours extra every day. Look at all the things I can do with it, right? So for example, you can spend more time with your kids. You can pay more attention to your kids in the case that you were just saying, get on the bus, get off to school, and I've got my own things going on. You can exercise, whether you're doing it at lunchtime, before work, after work, anytime you get free time in the middle of the day, you had more time to do that, which means you had at least the possibility of getting healthier because of this free time. So what did this then do? People had more freedom. They were finding a better work-life balance because they had more opportunity to do the other things that they wanted to do. If for some reason they were laid off, maybe they found a job at a place that did allow remote work. So maybe for the first time ever, they were experiencing what this meant. And they realized, hey, wait a minute, I don't need to live where I live anymore. I don't need to be in downtown New York City. I can go out somewhere else where the cost of living is a little bit cheaper, or maybe where I just want to be because the lifestyle is a little bit better. For those that did move outside of a city during this lockdown, they aren't going to want to come back. They have picked up and moved their lives. So the resignation may very well be simply because the office is telling them, we want you back in. We're bringing everyone back, and that includes you. And they may say, nope, see ya. Let's talk about people who did remain employed during this whole shutdown. For those people, their jobs looked a little bit different. If they had to go back into an office, and maybe it wasn't an office, maybe they were going because they were a fast food worker, they were a waiter, they were childcare. Any of these fields that require someone to show up were forced to be there. Put yourself in their shoes for a little bit. Think about what they were feeling. They might have said, hey, I am at high risk. I don't want to be there. They were probably looking for some other opportunity. Or think about teachers. They were forced to go, and they were forced to deal with the various people that wanted them to mask, or people who didn't want them to mask, or people who sent their kids with or without masks and felt strongly on one side or the other. Teachers had to deal with that. They had to accept that that was the new normal and adjust. They also were given virtual remote classes. So they had to do both virtual and in-class learning, which meant that they were now doing effectively 2 jobs. It was more stressful for them. Think about service industry jobs. There were a few benefits. If you wanted to go do deliveries of some sort, those went through the roof. Amazon sales went way up because everyone was staying home and ordering everything online so that they didn't have to come into contact with anyone else. But if you were within one of those jobs where you had to be there to service your customers, or you had to be there to physically do something, let's talk for a second about what those people were dealing with. Imagine that you were a fast food worker and people were coming in and you had new rules that said you have to wear masks, and you had people coming in that were anti-maskers. They would be arguing with you, and your job now includes some level of arguing with your clients, which of course is going to reduce your tips, which is going to make you look for something else. And if anything else is available, you're going to jump at the chance. Now, I actually had an experience with this just recently. I went out to eat multiple nights in a row because I hadn't been out in a while, and for those places that I had been to, I was frequenting the same places over and over again because I felt comfortable with what they had. However, after going to 2 other places that I had not been to in a year or more, I found the service was horrible. The employees that were there were very obviously the leftovers. They were those that were not able to find something else. They didn't care. My waiter or waitress at each of these places didn't come back frequently, didn't help me, really were not earning their money. Who is left at these industries that were hurt during this lockdown because people were having to deal with things that they didn't want to deal with? The service is suffering. If you're in a service industry, a lot of those are not normal 9-to-5 weekday jobs. If you have a family and you have young kids, maybe you need to get daycare for them. Well, daycares, a lot of the time, were not open for normal hours. Either they were open from 9 to 5, something like that, to handle what the standard business workday is, but they were closed for any additional hours. This makes it harder for those service industry workers to go back to work or to keep working, because if schools are closed or if their kids are virtual learning, they have no other choice. They have to stay home with their children. If you were a service industry worker during this lockdown and you left where you were or you got laid off, you are not going to want to go back. That is going to increase unemployment numbers and possibly increase resignation numbers if they had to take temporary other jobs that they didn't enjoy. So a lot of people had to go and find a job simply to pay their bills. They didn't like what they were doing, but they did it in order to get a paycheck, in order to make ends meet, in order to make it through a rough time. Now that that rough time is lifting, those people are going to not go back to those service industry jobs because they didn't like them in the first place, and they may have been laid off and scarred by those. They're going to be looking for something better. So this goes into why you might want to, as an employer, start offering some additional benefits. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The big elephant in the room is the healthcare workers. Think about what they went through. Obviously, they were having to deal with irate people that either were frustrated because they weren't getting the level of service, or they didn't think it should have been as big of a deal as it was, or they were overwhelmed. They were working too many hours. That industry is not what I would want to be in over the past year or so, or even moving forward into the near future, because there's just a lot of stress in that industry. Now, if you are one of them, you may very well be looking for a different job simply to get out of that level of stress. If you are, there's a reason to resign at some point in the future once you're able to find something different. For this year in particular, that is 2021, here's an interesting thing that happened. So remember, everything locked down last year. There were a lot of layoffs. A lot of people went on unemployment. But then all of a sudden, at the beginning of this year, everything started to open back up. And not only did it start to open back up, it opened back up to full swing very, very quickly. Well, all of those people who were laid off are not necessarily willing to come back. There's actually a situation with the airlines where they laid off or let retire many pilots, and now they can't keep up. And just recently, there have been several huge issues between American Airlines, Spirit Airlines, and others where they simply didn't have enough pilots. And of course, there were other issues relating to weather and scheduling and things like that. But focusing on the pilot aspect, they can't pull those pilots back in, and you can't have Billy Bob flying your plane. You have to train new pilots if you're going to bring them in, and that takes time. With everything opening up so quickly, the airline industry was not able to train or bring back as many people. The construction industry was not able to train or bring back as many people as they needed, as well as every other industry. And the service industry, for all the reasons I mentioned a little bit ago, people don't want to go back. Many companies offered their employees early retirement options in order to just get them out of the workforce during the lockdown in order to make things a little bit cheaper. Those people aren't coming back. So now all of a sudden, Companies are scrambling to figure out how can they fill these positions. That means either they have to raise pay, they have to increase benefits, they have to allow these people to work remotely, they have to offer some reason for either people to come back out of retirement because maybe they realize they retired a little bit too early, or they have to bring people in from another field, or even, in worst case scenario, they have to completely train from scratch somebody new that can do the job. And for some of these highly skilled positions, they can't just necessarily do that overnight. If you like this video, please subscribe and like below as it'll really help my channel grow, and also click the bell icon in order to get notified whenever I post new videos. Over my career, I've noticed an interesting trend, a cyclical pattern of employers having plenty of employees to choose from, and then employers not having enough. By going back and forth through that, there's a couple of interesting things that happen. Number one is when there are more employees than there are employers who need them, the employees are fighting for just a couple of positions. When that happens, employers know I can treat these people however I want. I can work them day, night, weekends, pay them very little. People will be competing in order to get this job for lower and lower salaries. That's obviously not good for employees, and over time causes burnout, stress, and overall unhappiness. And then eventually it cycles back the other direction where employers need to grow, and they need to grow potentially quickly, but the employees are maybe happy where they're working, or there just aren't enough to go around, or there aren't enough in that industry that have the skills they need. All of a sudden, employees are calling the shots, and they can say, well, I'm not going to go work for you unless you have something that I want that's better than anyone else. Back in 2000, when we had the dot-com boom, this exact same thing happened, and that happens to be when I got into IT. But every company was offering sign-on bonuses. They were all saying, hey, come here, we'll give you a few $1,000s. And it seemed great. It seemed too good to be true. And it lasted for a little while until obviously the dot-com bust. And then all of a sudden, nobody was hiring anymore, especially not for these IT jobs. So that same cycle is potentially happening right now. Employees actually have it really good right now. You can spend some time gaining a new skill, breaking into an industry that maybe was hard to break into, but jobs are going to be willing to train you, pay you more money, give you better benefits. So this is a great time to be looking for a job, which once again adds to the Great Resignation. You're going to leave if you find something better. People aren't machines. Eventually, over time, and we have definitely seen this over the last year and a half, people are going to burn out. They're either just going to quit and take some time off, or they're going to need something different. That's where we are now. So overall, really all people want is a decent salary, a decent work environment, some level of appreciation, and some flexibility in order to get what they need to do done. Assuming companies can adapt to this, everyone should be better off in the years going forward. Now, there are three interesting points that I think have come out of this Great Resignation. Number one, there are some benefits that we can get out of this, some improvements moving forward. Number two, there are a few problems that this created, and we'll talk about those in a second. Number three, there are some solutions that companies can implement in order to make everyone happier and more successful long term. Okay, number one, benefits. Remote work is going to become more common. As remote work becomes more common, people are going to get several benefits out of that. They are going to have greater flexibility to do all of the things that they want to do within their lives that were not allowed by having to go into an office full-time and commute. The office space that those employees were taking up can now be either downsized to save the company money or used for new hires to allow the company to grow but still maintain the same office footprint. And then all of that water cooler talk that was a waste of time over the years will be mostly eliminated, or at least partially eliminated, because people will be at home. The other benefit is going to be a pay increase. Of course, we're going to have to deal with inflation, with everything that's going on right now. But the fact that more employers are competing for fewer employees means they're going to have to pay more in order to get that limited supply of employees. Number two, some of the problems with this new working environment. Some people don't like working from home. They don't like being in isolation. They need the social aspect of what's going on at work. And for even those that do like this, they can sometimes end up blurring the lines between work and home life. When you do that, you never really feel like you're off of work, and that in and of itself can become very stressful. Add to that, what if you had kids that were remote learning? You had to make sure those kids were doing their work, were getting the education that they needed to get, while you were also performing at your job. That can be very stressful. Some jobs simply can't be done remotely. So while the benefits of remote work are great, you still have to go to work if you want to build a house or build anything or do a service or make a delivery. Those types of jobs will not benefit. If employers aren't willing to adapt quickly, they could miss out on this hiring boom that's going on right now. If you miss out on the qualified employees during this shortage of employees, then your company could suffer because maybe they don't have the talent to do the job they needed to do. Maybe you're not producing like you could be producing. Maybe your customers are less satisfied, and because of that, they move on to other companies. All of these things are a result of a company being too slow to respond to the changing environment and adapt to these employees that need more benefits, need more money. The last problem I'll go over is, if you're one of these people that wants to be on this trend, you're looking for more money, you're looking for a change, you've been unhappy, and you find something else that you think is great, be a little careful. If you have been at your current company for several years, you have seniority. If you go to a new company, you're the new guy, especially if you're working at a place that has a union. They normally force that. They say the people who've been here the longest have to stay, and you have to get rid of the new people sooner. But that's kind of the norm. So if you leave a job with seniority to go somewhere that doesn't have it, and something happens again, let's say things get shut down again, let's say something happens with a stock market crash. If anything occurs and they need to do layoffs, you will be one of the first ones to go. So while this is potentially a great time to look and the benefits could be there, just keep that in mind. All right, number 3, solutions to the problem. If you are a company, you need to be offering remote work if possible. Full-time remote work is great if you can do it. If you're dealing with a software developer or anybody that does anything online, those can go full remote. If you're dealing with something that isn't that way, maybe you can do a hybrid, a part work from home, a part work in the office. Maybe you just offer a heavily flexible scheduling concept where they can come in early and leave early, come in late, leave late. Anything you can do in order to attract more talent is going to be useful and is going to have the added result, added benefit of having these people that you hire be happier and therefore more productive. Start thinking of your employees as people, not just resources to exploit. They have needs, wants, and desires. Find out what those are. Maybe what they want is career advancement. Maybe they just want a pay raise. Maybe they want some kind of educational opportunities that could allow them career advancement in the future. Maybe they need some kind of flexibility for their families because they have specific needs. The more you look at these things as an employer, the happier you're going to make your employees, and the more you're going to bring new employees in that will be successful and work hard for you. And if you don't, you're risking your company's future. That's it for today, guys. If you have any thoughts, please leave your comments down below, and I will see you next time.